My sister Blair stood under the ballroom lights at the company's annual awards dinner, champagne flute raised high, and said the words that should have destroyed me. This compliance system is my life's work. Everything we've built here, the processes, the safeguards, the wins, it all came from understanding what companies really need. 200 executives applauded. My boss smiled and nodded from the front table. Board members leaned forward, impressed, and every single thing she described, every process she claimed to have designed, every safeguard she said she'd implemented, every victory she was taking credit for, was mine. I sat 3 tables back, wine glass untouched, hands folded in my lap. I didn't interrupt, didn't stand, didn't correct the record. I just felt something colder than anger settle deep in my chest. Something calculating, something that had been building for 5 years. Around me, colleagues whispered congratulations. Someone patted my shoulder. "Your sister is amazing." I smiled and nodded, and in that moment, I decided to stay completely silent. A woman from accounting leaned toward me, her voice warm with genuine kindness. "You must be so proud of her." I smiled so convincingly I surprised myself. "I am." The lie tasted like nothing. Like air. Like all the other truths I'd swallowed over the years to keep peace in my family. On stage, Blair continued her speech, describing a compliance framework she couldn't have built if her life depended on it. She used terms I'd taught her, quoted statistics from my reports, referenced case studies from audits I'd personally managed. She didn't look at me once during the entire speech. She didn't have to. She thought I was safe, predictable. The dependable older sister who'd always cleaned up after her, who'd always stepped aside, who'd always chosen family loyalty over personal recognition. She thought I'd stay quiet forever. The applause swelled as Blair finished her speech and raised her glass in a toast. People stood, cameras flashed. She was wrong about me staying quiet, dead wrong. "My name is Rachel Klein. I'm 42 years old. White, American. The older sister who learned early that being reliable meant being invisible. I work in construction compliance, a field most people find boring until a company gets fined millions for violations. I do audits, risk mitigation, documentation that keeps companies alive when regulators come knocking. I don't sell ideas. I don't charm clients. I don't give inspiring speeches. I build systems that hold under pressure. Systems that work when everything else fails. Systems that protect companies from the kind of catastrophic failures that end careers and shutter businesses. It's technical work. Detailed work. The kind of work that requires you to understand building codes, safety regulations, federal compliance standards, and how to implement all of it without bringing construction to a halt. Blair, my younger sister, couldn't explain the difference between OSHA standards and EPA regulations if her life depended on it. But she'd been standing on my systems for years, presenting them as her own brilliance. And I'd let her. I was the reason she looked brilliant. The invisible foundation, holding up her shiny career. 5 years earlier, I'd made the mistake that started everything. I referred Blair into the company. She'd been fired from her previous job. Something about creative differences with management, which I later learned meant she'd missed deadlines and blamed others. She'd moved back home with our parents at 32, depressed and directionless. "She just needs a chance," my mother had said over Sunday dinner, her voice heavy with concern. "You have connections, Rachel. You could help her." I believed her. I believed Blair just needed the right opportunity, the right environment, the right support. So I called my boss, put my reputation on the line, vouched for my sister's potential and fresh perspective. Blair started in our communications department. Entry-level, simple tasks. I thought I was giving her a fresh start. I didn't know I was handing Blair access to my work, my reputation, and the perfect stage to perform competence she didn't possess. She learned fast. Not how to do the work, but how invisible I was willing to be. The first time she took my work, I didn't recognize it as theft. She'd asked to sit in on one of my leadership presentations. "Just to learn," she'd said. "I want to understand what you do." I'd been flattered. My little sister was finally taking interest in my career. 2 weeks later, she reused my entire presentation in a department meeting. Didn't change the slides, didn't credit me. Just presented my analysis of compliance gaps as if she'd done the research herself. When I asked her about it afterward, she'd laughed. Actually laughed. Relax, Rachel. We're family. What's yours is mine, right? Besides, I presented it better than you would have. You're terrible at public speaking. I'd stood there stunned, not knowing how to respond. She'd patted my arm. Don't be so sensitive. I'm helping the company. Isn't that what matters? And because I didn't know how to argue with that logic, because family was supposed to support each other, I let it go. That was my first mistake. Family became the excuse for everything that followed. At Sunday dinner the next week, my mother praised Blair's drive and initiative. Your sister really impressed some important people this week, Mom said, beaming. They're saying she has real leadership potential. I'd opened my mouth to correct one small detail, to mention that the presentation was actually based on my work. Mom's face had hardened. Why do you always need credit, Rachel? Can't you just be happy for your sister? My father had looked down at his plate, silent, neutral, the way he always was when Mom defended Blair. So I'd closed my mouth and finished my dinner in silence. That became the pattern. Any attempt to clarify, to set the record straight, to claim ownership of my own work, it was labeled as jealousy, as small-mindedness, as me being unable to be happy for my sister's success. So I stopped trying to correct the record at family dinners. Silence became my survival skill. The price I paid for family peace. Blair was promoted 6 months later, from communications coordinator to senior compliance liaison, a role that required technical knowledge she didn't have. For her innovative approach to compliance communication, the announcement said. I'd trained the entire compliance team that year, developed new protocols, restructured our audit processes. The work that innovation was based on was mine. HR sent Blair flowers. My boss took her to lunch. The CEO mentioned her in the quarterly meeting as an example of rising talent. No one mentioned my name. That was the night I started keeping receipts. I created a folder on my personal laptop, started saving emails, documenting conversations, keeping copies of every presentation, every report, every framework I built. I didn't know why I was doing it. Some instinct, some quiet voice that said this wouldn't end well. I didn't confront Blair. I just prepared. The thing about Blair was that she could repeat my language perfectly. She had good memory for phrases, for technical terms, for the impressive-sounding explanations I'd give her when she asked for help. But she couldn't explain why any of it worked. She didn't understand the underlying principles, couldn't troubleshoot when something went wrong, couldn't adapt the system to new situations. She was a performer, not a builder. And performers need an audience, but they also need someone backstage, making sure the show doesn't fall apart. I was backstage, invisible, essential. Blair would text me before meetings, quick reminder, what's the difference between corrective action and preventive action? I'd explain it. Again, for the 10th time. She'd go into the meeting sounding brilliant. I began to notice something. She needed me close, needed me available, needed me small enough that I wasn't a threat, but present enough that I could save her when she got in over her head. So I began stepping back, slowly, testing how far I could go. Meeting invites that used to include me started disappearing from my calendar. Emails I sent to project teams went unanswered until Blair forwarded them, taking credit for raising the issue. Clients who used to call me directly were redirected to Blair's line. When I asked about it, Blair smiled sweetly and said, "Must be a glitch. You know how IT is." But it wasn't a glitch. I checked the distribution lists, watched the email threads, noticed the pattern. Blair was systematically removing me from visibility, positioning herself between me and the work, making sure when people thought of compliance expertise, they thought of her face, not mine. She needed me small, contained, close enough to use, far enough from the spotlight that I couldn't challenge her narrative. It was calculated, strategic, and I realized something important. She wasn't going to stop. This wasn't temporary. This was her plan. My mother's version of our careers became the family mythology. At gatherings, she'd tell people Blair was the visionary, while I was good with details. That's how you erase someone without admitting it. You redefine their value as something small, something support level, something behind the scenes. Visionary versus detail-oriented, creative versus technical, leader versus worker. The language mattered. It shaped how people saw us, how they valued our contributions. Mom would tell stories about Blair's presentations, her client meetings, her growing reputation. When people asked about my work, Mom would smile and say, "Oh, Rachel keeps everything running smoothly. She's so organized, like I was a file cabinet, like my expertise was just administrative tidiness." I stopped correcting her too, stopped fighting for recognition at family events, stopped trying to explain that details meant expertise and organized meant I built the entire system you're all so proud of. I just smiled and nodded and let them believe whatever version of me was easiest. The federal audit was announced in March, a routine compliance review that could destroy the company if we failed. High stakes, no margin for error. Auditors would review 5 years of documentation, interview key personnel, inspect active sites. At the emergency leadership meeting, our CEO asked who should lead the response. Blair's hand went up immediately. "I'll handle it. I built our compliance framework. I know it inside and out." Everyone looked relieved. The expert was volunteering, crisis averted. The room applauded. My boss glanced at me, a question in his eyes. I could have spoken up, could have said the truth. Instead, I said nothing. Let the applause continue. Let Blair bask in the confidence of executives who believed she could handle this. She assumed I'd do what I always did. Step in at the last minute, fix everything, hand her the answers, make her look brilliant. She assumed I'd save her again. I stayed up late the night before the audit prep meeting started, running scenarios, identifying gaps, preparing answers to the questions I knew auditors would ask. My laptop glowed in the dark. Coffee went cold on my desk. I built response frameworks, compiled evidence, created cheat sheets that would walk anyone through the most complex compliance questions. Then at 2 a.m, I closed my laptop, saved nothing to the shared drive, sent nothing to Blair, prepared nothing for her to use. For the first time in 5 years, I let my sister stand alone. The audit prep meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Blair would walk in expecting me to have done the heavy lifting, expecting the safety net to be there like it always was. But this time, there was no net. I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. The auditors asked their first substantive question 40 minutes into the meeting. "Can you walk us through your incident escalation protocol? Specifically, how you differentiate between level 2 and level 3 violations?" It was basic, foundational, something anyone leading compliance should know cold. Blair paused. Her confident smile flickered. "Well," she began, "it's really about the severity and the context of the situation." The lead auditor waited. "Can you be more specific? What criteria determine the level classification?" Blair's eyes cut to me. Quick. Desperate. I kept my hands folded on the table, my expression neutral, professional. The room noticed, my boss noticed, the CFO noticed, the auditors definitely noticed. Blair stammered through an answer that was vague enough to be meaningless. The auditors made notes, not good notes. My mother called that evening, her voice tight with anger. "Why didn't you help your sister today?" "Your boss called me, said the audit didn't go well," said Blair, struggled with basic questions. I stayed calm. She said she built the compliance system. I assumed she could explain it. Silence on the other end. Then, "You know she needs your support. You know she gets nervous in high-pressure situations. You could have stepped in." She told everyone she was the expert, Mom. I was respecting her authority. "Don't be clever with me, Rachel. You sabotaged your own sister." I felt something break loose inside me, something that had been holding me in place for years. I didn't sabotage anyone. I just didn't do her job for her. Mom's voice turned cold. "You've always been jealous of her. Always." I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother, and I realized I was done explaining myself, done defending the decision to let my sister be accountable for the work she claimed to own. The crisis came 2 days later. A major client demanded emergency answers about compliance violations at one of their sites, technical questions, specific regulatory citations, immediate responses required or they'd pull a multi-million-dollar contract. Blair's phone rang. Then her email flooded. Then her text messages. She forwarded everything to me. Urgent. Need your help, ASAP. I didn't respond. She called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. By the third call, she was crying. "Rachel, please. I don't know what to tell them. I don't understand the citations they're asking about." I turned my phone face down and went to lunch. 2 hours later, my boss called me directly. "Rachel, I need you in the conference room. Now." The Hartwell account is on the line, and we're about to lose them. I walked into chaos. Blair red-faced and panicked. The client's legal team on speaker, demanding answers. My boss looking like he might fire someone. My boss pulled me aside before I sat down. I need you in this room. Can you handle this? I met his eyes. Only if ownership is clarified. A long pause. He studied my face, maybe seeing me clearly for the first time. What do you mean? I mean, I'll answer their questions. I'll save the account. But I want it on record that I'm the compliance architect, not an assistant, not a detail person, the architect. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, understood. We walked back into the conference room. My boss introduced me properly this time. Rachel Klein, our senior compliance architect and the designer of our current compliance framework. Blair's face went white. I fielded every question, cited specific regulations, explained the violations and our corrective actions, provided the documentation they needed. The client's lawyer thanked me by name. Everything shifted in that moment. The power dynamic, the narrative, the understanding of who actually knew what. Family dinner that Sunday was a war zone. Blair cried through the entire meal. She humiliated me. She made me look incompetent in front of everyone. Mom's eyes blazed with accusation. How could you do that to your sister? How could you be so cruel? I cut my chicken calmly. I answered questions Blair couldn't answer, questions about work I created. You undermined her authority. She doesn't have authority over work she didn't build. Mom stood up, her chair scraping loud. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. You can't stand that she's more successful than you. I set down my fork, looked at my father. He'd been silent the entire meal, watching me carefully. Dad, do you have anything to say? He looked at Mom, then at Blair, then at me. I think, he said slowly, that maybe we haven't been paying attention to the right things. Mom's face flushed. Blair sobbed harder. But Dad kept looking at me, and I realized he finally saw the pattern, finally understood what had been happening. The company invited me to present at the Regional Compliance Conference in May. A prestigious event, industry leaders, potential for major visibility. I accepted. Blair assumed we'd co-present. She announced it publicly at the next staff meeting before I could respond. Rachel and I will be presenting our compliance framework at the conference, she said brightly. A sister team. Isn't that perfect? People smiled, nodded. What a nice story. Sisters working together. I didn't correct her, didn't say a word. Just smiled and let everyone believe we'd be presenting together. The conference coordinator emailed me for presentation details. I sent the abstract, the outline, the speaker bio, my name only. The coordinator replied, just to confirm, you're the sole presenter? Your colleague mentioned a joint session. Sole presenter, I wrote back. There must have been a misunderstanding. 2 weeks before the conference, the program was published. My name, my session, solo. Blair saw it and called me immediately. What happened? Why am I not listed? It's my presentation, my framework, my work. But I thought, you thought wrong. The conference room was packed, 300 people, industry leaders in the front rows, my company's executives in attendance. Blair sat in the third row, her face carefully neutral. I presented for 40 minutes, walked through the compliance framework I'd built, explained the methodology, showed case studies. The audience was engaged, taking notes, asking smart questions. Then the moderator, a senior compliance officer from a Fortune 500 company, asked a question. A simple one, technical, specific. Can you explain how your system escalates violations? What triggers the movement from level 2 to level 3 classification? The exact question Blair had fumbled in the audit. Blair tensed in her seat. Her eyes locked on me. The room waited. I stood straighter at the podium and smiled. Of course, I said. I answered clearly, calmly. Walked through the criteria, explained the decision tree, gave specific examples. The moderator nodded, satisfied. That's an elegant solution. Did you develop this protocol yourself? Yes, I said simply. I designed the entire framework over a 3-year period, testing and refining based on actual audit results. More questions came. All technical, all specific, all questions that required deep understanding of the work. I answered every single one. Executives leaned forward, taking notes. People approached the stage to ask follow-up questions. The applause when I finished wasn't polite conference clapping. It was genuine, enthusiastic, and it wasn't for Blair. She sat frozen in her seat, watching her carefully constructed image crumble in real time, watching the room recognize who actually built what she'd been claiming credit for. After the session, people swarmed me. Business cards, LinkedIn requests, job offers. Blair slipped out the side door without saying goodbye. HR called me in the following Monday. We need to clarify some things about project ownership and attribution. The director said. Legal was in the room too, and my boss, and the VP of operations. There's been some confusion about who developed certain compliance protocols, the HR director continued. We need documentation. I handed over the folder I'd been keeping for 5 years, emails showing I'd created the frameworks, draft documents with my revision history, training materials I'd developed, meeting notes where I'd presented concepts that later appeared in Blair's presentations. Everything time-stamped, everything dated, everything proving the timeline of creation. The legal team reviewed it silently. My boss's expression shifted from confusion to anger. Why didn't you say something sooner? He asked. I did, multiple times. I was told I was being territorial, that I should be happy to support my sister's success. More silence. The HR director cleared her throat. We'll need to address this internally. There will be consequences. 3 days later, Blair was quietly removed from the compliance team, reassigned to a different department. No announcement, no explanation to staff, just gone. Mom called, begging me to fix it. Your sister could lose her job, Rachel. Is that what you want? To destroy her career? I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped holding up the lie. She made mistakes. People make mistakes. You could forgive her. She didn't make mistakes, Mom. She systematically took credit for 5 years of my work. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Blair texted me long apologies, promised to change, promised to give me credit, promised things would be different. I'm sorry. I was scared. I thought I'd lose my job if people knew the truth. Can we start over? For a moment, reading her texts, it felt like it might be over, like maybe we could move past this as a family. But then I remembered the audit, the client crisis, the 5 years of watching her accept praise for my work. The promises felt empty. I didn't respond. I was offered a promotion in June, regional compliance director, new city, new office, new team, broader authority, significant raise, and most importantly, no shared credit with anyone. My work would be mine. My reputation would be earned. My success would be undeniable. I accepted immediately. The announcement went out company-wide. Congratulations poured in. People who'd watched Blair take credit for years sent me private messages. Finally. You deserve this. Blair resigned 2 weeks after my promotion was announced. Couldn't handle working at the same company anymore. Couldn't face the whispers. Couldn't rebuild credibility after the truth came out. She moved to another state, took a lower-level job, started over with a clean slate where no one knew the story. Mom stopped calling me daily. The silence was a relief. Dad called instead. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. I should have said that years ago. At my going-away lunch, my boss stood and gave a toast. Rachel built something most people don't appreciate until it's gone. Invisible infrastructure that keeps an entire company safe. She did it without fanfare, without demanding recognition, without making it about ego. He paused. That's changing now. We're making sure Rachel gets the recognition she's always deserved. People applauded. Real applause, not the polite kind. A colleague whispered to me, we all knew, you know, about your sister. We just didn't know how to say anything. I smiled. It's okay, it's over now. But it wasn't really over. Not completely. Families don't heal that fast. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Mom still defended Blair, still found ways to minimize what happened, still called it a misunderstanding between sisters. But I didn't need her to understand anymore. Didn't need her validation or approval. I had my own life now, my own success, earned and undeniable. I didn't expose my sister publicly, didn't give interviews about what she'd done, didn't seek revenge beyond holding her accountable. I didn't destroy her. I just stopped holding the lie together. And when she couldn't answer that one simple question at the conference, when the room full of experts waited for her to explain work she'd claimed to build, everything she'd taken fell back where it belonged. The life she'd bragged about, the career she'd built on my invisible labor, the reputation she'd borrowed without permission, all of it collapsed the moment she had to demonstrate actual knowledge. I moved to the new city, Started the new job. Built a new team that knew my work from day one. Blair eventually found stability in her new position. We don't talk much. Holiday texts, birthday cards, the bare minimum of family obligation. Mom still tells people Blair had a rough patch but is doing better now. Still frames it as temporary difficulty rather than consequences for deliberate theft. I don't correct her anymore. Don't need to. Because the people who matter, the executives, the industry leaders, the colleagues who actually understand compliance work, they know the truth. They know who built what. And the life Blair had bragged about for 5 years? That life was finally, undeniably, completely mine again.